everybody, it's Dr. Drake 63 here today, and going to talk to you a little bit about this BCM Recce 14 rifle. It's a recent acquisition that I passed the 1,000 round mark today, and want to talk a little bit about the philosophy of this particular type of weapon. And I also want to talk about the philosophy that goes behind your AR and my other ARs. In other words, are they designed to do everything? Are they supposed to be accurate? Are they supposed to be reliable? Are they supposed to be everything to everybody? These are the kind of questions I want to talk about a little bit today as we talk about, not too specific about this particular rifle, other than I'll do a little bragging about it. But in addition to that, just want to talk to you about my philosophies. First of all, from a truth in advertising standpoint, needs to be said that I'm not ex-military. I've never used ARs or any kind of firearm in any kind of combat situation. I'm not law enforcement, ex-law enforcement, anything. I'm a hobbyist. I'm a guy that's done a lot of research. I'm a guy that's done a lot of shooting. So I'm probably like most of you watching. And my hat's off to the folks that have had to use firearms in the line of duty. A lot of respect for you putting yourselves in harm's way, and that needs to be said. Okay, so the BCM Recce 14, and I have been properly set straight, and that is how you pronounce this. I think I've called it a Recce. I think I've called it a Recce. I've called it a lot of things. This was a firearm, guys, that unlike a lot of my prior AR excursions, 100% this was built by BCM. And I've been extremely impressed with it. This rifle, like I said, just over 1,000 rounds. And there's going to certainly be people that will say to you, hey man, that's a weekend for me, or that's a trip to the range, and I get that. This is a newer rifle for me. I've had it several weeks, maybe a little bit longer. But here's what I can tell you about it so far. And in conjunction with this Trejicon MRO, this particular rifle has not even thought about failing to cycle around, failure to eject, anything it's not supposed to do. It's been 100% perfect and flawless operation, and it's so darn perfect in what it's supposed to do that it's boring, and it's put my dog to sleep. So you can see that right there. Anyway, this rifle has done exactly what it's supposed to do. Now, it needs to be said that this is not the most accurate AR I have ever owned. I did a build once using a cold hammer forged heavy barrel that was something I actually bought at Palmetto State Armory, and it was an FN made barrel, and but it was a heavy profile barrel, and in conjunction with a really light trigger, I was able, with the right ammo, able to group that really tight groups. It was a 1 MOA or less shooter. Now it needs to be said that ARs in their original form were not designed to be target rifles. They were designed to be rifles that would maintain somewhere between 2 and 4 MOA at 100 meters and going out, capable of hitting the big pop-up targets out to 300 meters, and more than anything, be able to put out quite a bit of firepower, be very accurate in full auto, and this is predate and select fire, and to be reliable. And the first ones, a little bit sketchy on reliability, and there's a whole lot of stories that go with that, such as the type of ammo that was used, such as the Army, some of the folks in the research and development and proving out the design, having issues with it and believing that it wasn't the appropriate weapon, sabotaging the efforts, you name it. Lots of different things went into it, but what we have today, which is an M4 type of scenario, is a proven design. I don't think anybody will argue that, and over the years, going into 62 grain ammo married up with a 1-in-7 twist barrel has proven to be very combat effective. So not even going to get into that, but it needs to be pointed out that this is a firearm that from the manufacturer is going to be north of $1,400, and you know, you can buy much cheaper ARs. You can buy component parts and build them from places like Palmetto State, or using Andersen Lowers and things of that nature, and you can build them for $1,000 cheaper. And people will load them up with ammo, and they'll go shoot them, and they'll work, and they'll say, and this is something you see a lot, and to some degree I used to think, which was, hey man, it does the same thing as these expensive rifles, the Bravo companies, the Daniel Defense, the LaRue's, and you know, you could go on and on and on, Novetskis. So what's the big deal, man? Well, here's what's different. The attention to detail and quality control, the materials used, the processes, manufacturing processes used to attach gas systems, things of that nature, metallurgy, as I said, everything adds up to being a more expensive but more reliable firearm that has a much better fit and finish. Now, if you want to say, hey, why for this kind of money is this not the most accurate rifle you can get? Well, let's keep in mind it's not designed to be the most accurate rifle you can get. This particular type of rifle right here is designed to be the most reliable you can get. And I've never heard anybody say anything negative about BCM in terms of reliability. I've never heard anything say anything negative about BCM except along the lines of, oh, you know, some of their stuff's too expensive. And I have to admit, when I first got into this hobby and was building Palmetto State type of scenarios, I myself thought, why would you need to spend all this extra money when you can, you know, have 2 or 3 rifles for what this costs? Well, I want to have a rifle that I know is going to function no matter what the weather, no matter what the ammo, no matter what the circumstance, if it's a little bit dirty or if I just cleaned it, you name it. I want to have what I consider to be the best chance at reliability, and at least in my experience, this is it. And you can tell everything from when you cycle the bolt. You know, it's got a solidness, it's got a smoothness that you just don't get with all ARs out there. You know, I didn't get this with even more expensive Smith & Wessons that I've owned. You know, if you were willing to drop money on components and change out triggers, change out bolt carrier groups, things like that, you could do that. So when we're talking about a firearm of this kind of cost, you know, you expect a lot of things, but what you shouldn't expect is that this is going to be necessarily a tack driver. This was not built to be a tack driver. If we wanted to put a heavier profile barrel, we want to put a stainless barrel, a non-chrome line barrel, things of that nature, match grade, we could make this more accurate. But that's not going to make it more reliable, and that's going to add a lot of weight to it usually. And the thing about this is, with the optic here, this is just a hair over 6 pounds, which to me is amazing. And if you have to lug this thing around all day for any reason, which in my case would probably be a hunting application, hunting varmints, coyotes, things like that. Love to coyote hunt. If you're going to some kind of a training event, competition, something of that nature, you want to have all that kind of stuff. Now, I will say this, you run 3 or 4 magazines in quick succession down this barrel, and this handguard's going to get hot. So at least for me, I'm much less inclined to put something like covers on the handguard. I'm more inclined to just put on a leather work glove and have at it. But in terms of the lightweight, the durability of this, quality, in my opinion, is second to none. Let's talk a minute about Andersen Lowers. One of the most common things I see on Facebook pages and various debates from the sometimes civilized crowd who enjoys the black rifles centers around Andersen Lowers. And it seems like one of the most popular things to do is for somebody to start some kind of a thread that puts down Andersen Lowers, talks about them being crap, or they don't work, or they're not reliable. Because the fact of the matter is you can get these things $35. I've seen them that cheap. And whereas if you buy an Ovechkin lower, a BCM lower, something like that, you're up into the hundreds. So that means the Andersen stuff has to be crap, right? Well, I'm not going to necessarily agree with that. I think what you're giving up there is some fit and finish. You're going to end up having that chalky kind of scenario. The machining processes don't have as high a degree of quality control. So I think what you'll see with something like an Andersen lower or some of the cheap PSA blemish deals that you get, and I've built with them and never had any problem with Palmetto State lowers, so I just need to come out and say that. But the problem you may encounter are going to be they don't have the degree of quality control that you're going to see at some of these shops like a BCM, a Daniel Defense, an Ovechkin, perhaps a Spike, so forth and so on. Now, there's only a handful of foundries that are actually forging these lowers. For example, I think I've seen where Andersen and Colt are made by the same foundry. I could be wrong about that, but Daniel Defense is made by one of the same foundries that some of the cheaper stuff is. Well, what does that mean? Well, a couple things. What does it has to do with what does that company do with them once they get them? In the case of a Daniel Defense, what they're going to do is spend extra time and manufacturing cost putting a finish on those lowers that you're not going to see with a Palmetto State or you're not going to see with an Andersen. They've probably set up some better equipment in terms of doing the various milling and drilling holes and things like that. And there's probably a quality check step or two that you're just not going to see with some of this cheaper stuff. But Andersen cranks out lowers, and to be honest with you, I'm waiting for somebody to start showing me all the pictures of failed Andersen lowers and all that kind of stuff. I haven't seen them. Now, one thing you might notice, and this is a word out to you builders, and I've built a number of ARs, so I'm talking with a little bit of experience. One of the things you'll notice is the fit between the upper and the lower. It's kind of a hit or miss thing, and that's why you have products out there like plastic wedges which seat into your lower, which basically create some extra tension to eliminate wobble or wiggle between your upper and your lower. Typically these things aren't going to affect function unless they get too bad, but they kind of tend to drive guys nuts, and you don't want something that's going to be wiggling back and forth typically. And I know I don't. I want my firearms to be tight in every respect, and not have play and things of that nature. So, just kind of throwing that out there. That's where you're kind of seeing your differences. In other words, BCM is not sending this rifle out the door unless they've checked that this upper and this lower are an awesome fit, unless they fit perfectly. If there's some play, if there's some wiggle room or something like that, guess what? BCM's not going to send it out the door. So what you get when you're paying this extra money is all the various working parts, the barrel, the gas system, the bolt group, the trigger, how it's checked, how it's tested, what the standards are. You can't get any wobble whatsoever on this BCM buttstock. It's a 6-position buttstock, and it just doesn't wobble at all. And I've You know, I've seen brand new Colt 6920s right out of the box. Expensive guns in their own right, going for 900 or so now, and it's got a cheap buttstock on it that wiggles like all get out. I've had two different Smith & Wessons. Both of them were of the higher end. Neither of them were sports. One of them was an optics ready version, which you can get now for about $1,100 or so, and another one was about a $900 law enforcement version. Wobbly buttstocks. So a lot of guys will go out and buy these rifles that are lower priced and then commence to replace all the stuff that makes some of the higher end rifles more expensive too. And that's something I've noticed. You know, we're going to replace the furniture, we're going to replace the trigger, we're going to replace the handguard, we're going to replace the buttstock. In some cases going as crazy as, hey, we've got a fixed A2 type sight that acts as a gas block, and we're going to take that off and put on a micro system and free float the handguard. By the time you do all that, you're probably getting kind of close to spending the kind of money where maybe you should look at a Daniel Defense or a BCM or something like that. But again, for a lot of guys, that's half the fun. So I don't want to criticize anybody, but biggest thing I would say is make sure that whatever you're shooting, enjoy shooting it. Don't worry about what other people are shooting. This nonsense where people go back and forth with each other and call each other's idiots and bring each other's mothers into it all over the brand name of a rifle that they're shooting, and whether it's top tier, whether it's middle tier, or whether it's an entry level, who cares? You know, I'm going to shoot just through this rifle alone. I'm probably going to shoot about 5,000 rounds this year. Maybe a little bit less because I tend to spread it around, but probably, because this is going to be the AR that I'm going to use every time I want to go use an AR, unless we're getting into 300 black, and then I've got a different firearm for that. But so looking at somewhere 3,000 to 5,000 rounds this year. This rifle's going to go through a lot and have a lot asked of it. That's a guy that's going to go out and shoot a box of ammo 2 or 3 times a year, you know, maybe a couple hundred rounds. That rifle isn't going to be put through any kind of test at all. It's not going to be stressed. It's not going to be asked to provide a high level of dependability that this will. And you know, I talk about shooting 3,000 to 5,000 rounds through this rifle within the next year. Heck, there's guys that are going to shoot 30,000 rounds through their rifles in the next year, and but chances are that they're going to be spending their money on something like that and not buying an entry-level AR. Other thing I just wanted to talk about, you know, what are your main uses? I mentioned coyote hunting. I'm not opposed to throwing a scope on top of an AR. I recently picked up a Primary Arms 1 through 6 with the ACSS reticle. It currently resides on top of a Galil Ace project that I'm working on, and it's proven to be a very, very nice scope and very accurate. So there's a chance I will put that or another one just like it on top of this firearm before I go out to my annual Montana hunting trip, which is mostly about deer, but we also, as a favor to the rancher where we hunt, we'll take out every coyote we see because they're a cattle rancher and coyotes are bad news. So enough said there. So we may give that a try. But it just needs to be said, very few ARs are good in every single role that you have for them. And there's going to be people that say, no, but. Typically, if you're looking for a trade-off kind of firearm, you're giving something up. And this right here, this is a self-defense firearm. If something happens and I need a rifle, this is the one I'm grabbing, and I know it's going to work because every single time I pulled the trigger, it's gone bang. Got 1,000 times of doing that plus so far, and I'll be surprised if I really ever have that problem. Maybe I'll wear out a spring or something someday. Similar kind of firearm I have that's been through thousands and thousands of rounds is my Arsenal SLR 104, and you guys, some of you have seen that. Those videos on that particular rifle. It's dependable as all get out. I think it's well past 4,000 rounds. It's never thought about having a hiccup, and guess what? That's an $1,100, $1,200 firearm when you can get it. They've stopped making them for import to the U.S. due to military contracts in Bulgaria. But the point of the matter is, rifles like that are what I'm interested in. If I'm interested in utmost accuracy, typically I'm looking at something more like a bolt-action hunting rifle. And exception to that lately, a super accurate, super reliable semi-auto is the Galil Ace. But again, you're talking about spending upwards of $1,800, $1,900 or more for those kind of firearms. So, you know, you get what you pay for. And with this, we're definitely getting what we pay for. If you're somebody that's using an AR for going out and punching holes in paper and it's fun and you're not running it through thousands and thousands of rounds, you're probably not going to notice the difference between a $600, $700 AR or one that costs twice as much. You probably aren't going to really notice. Maybe some aesthetics things, but as far as function, you won't notice. If you're somebody that wants to take a lower end rifle and run 5,000 rounds to it, I suggest you take a step back, look at the cost of ammo and say, hey, I'm going to go out and spend you know, $1,500, $2,000 on 5,000 rounds. Why don't I just get a better rifle while I'm at it? But that's just how I think about stuff, and we're all different. But this is just kind of a rambling kind of video, I have to admit. I guess title-wise, we're going to call it 1,000 round review of the BCM and other shit. Thanks again for your time. This is Dr. Drake 63 saying so long.